Welcome to Coming Home, surviving and thriving in homeschooling. This week I've got some more questions and my answers to bring to you. I'm going to preface these by introducing it this way. Yesterday was the funeral of an old and dear friend. She was old enough to be my mother, but she was still a friend. I couldn't go to the funeral. I had to watch it by live stream. So as I was watching it and thinking about her and some of the family members and what was going on, which is typical for a funeral, they spoke well, there was some lovely singing, and I found myself pondering again. Funerals aren't necessarily a difficult thing to go to. Well, actually, perhaps they are. It's not that I enjoy a funeral, but to say that a funeral helps me to reassess what's important in life is better. It gives me the opportunity of a mini self-audit. And although I don't like the feeling that I might cry, I've come to appreciate going to a funeral. And unless it's a particularly tragic funeral, a more normal funeral has its benefits. So with that in mind, the self-audit that once again I went through yesterday, I'm thinking about some of these questions I have been asked. The first one I'm going to talk about is, what were your aha moments? The times when you just went, yeah, this is good. I'm glad I'm doing this. The first thing I thought of when thinking through this question was that my dear sister-in-law, Cheryl is an intermediate school teacher, or was. She's retired now. And in New Zealand, an intermediate teacher would have children in their classes, typically 11 and 12 years old. She was around and watching, observing and commenting when all of my children would have been going through, eventually, their intermediate years. It didn't take long into the homeschooling. She came to stay with us for a little while, and she spent time with each of the children. They were quite young at the time. We'd only been homeschooling for 2-3 years at the time. And she said to us one day, she said, you know, your kids have never lost the wow factor. She had often seen it throughout the school years, is that when children are very young, typically when they've started school, they've just got this wonderful innocence, and you would recognize it as the wow factor. They're not afraid or embarrassed to just go wow or get excited about things. But as they get a little bit older, it becomes less and less cool to do that, and more likely to not, because you might get laughed at. The interesting thing is that the wow factor never actually went away for our children. And even as they went through into their teenage years, into their young adulthood, and even now, well and truly some of them into adulthood, they each have this wow factor about them that is fascinating to watch. What were some other aha moments for me? Seeing them interact with a variety of ages. If you've been around public schooling expectations, you will know that they really only interact with their own grade or age group. Typically, if you're in a church scenario, they're always divided up according to age and school grade. But in homeschooling, typically, you are interacting together with a whole lot of children of a variety of ages. And I clearly remember saying one day, wow, these kids, they don't even realize they're all of different age groups. They just didn't seem to notice. It was desirable to my husband and myself to grow their relationships with each other, obviously over a period of time, so that we would have close relationships within our family. And watching them interact with each other willingly was heartening to me. There were obviously times when I would have to coach them through, or maybe even tell them off about being patronizing or mean, and just helping them over that little childhood bump in how to actually react to each other. The satisfaction of seeing them learn something new is always warming to a mother's heart. So that's an aha moment. You're actually there witnessing it. It's not the school teacher seeing that they've just learned something new. It's you. That's a privilege, especially when you see their eyes light up and they're excited. They're so proud of themselves. Oh, definitely. That's a real goodie. The satisfaction of hearing them tell somebody else about something that was really interesting to them that they had learned or read about, and they were talking about it in an unasked way or an untested way. So that is, they hadn't been asked, tell me about something that you learned today. So they initiated the information. That was always a satisfying thing to watch. Seeing them relate to adults. I'm thinking of our own children here, but also watching typically other homeschooling children too. Generally speaking, homeschool children tend to relate to adults quite well. This could be for a couple of reasons. Firstly, the adults in their lives, typically other homeschooling parents, are likely to be around them more. Therefore, they are going to take more of an interest in them. They also share the whole homeschooling philosophy. So they're more likely to be asking them questions and expecting their feedback or their contribution to a conversation. The other reason that they might relate a little better, they're actually used to talking to people of a variety of ages, and so it's not unusual for them to talk something through with an adult or be included in a conversation. Another aha moment would be watching them enjoying lying in the sun or on their bed or in a comfy chair when they're reading their book or doing their work, rather than having to sit up at a desk or a table. Definitely an aha moment was when our older two children both finished their high school years at about the same time. And I remember a friend saying to me, I met her for coffee, they'd finished their homeschooling and they were getting ready to apply for university. And she said to me, wow, you must be so proud of them. I was assessing that later as my first reaction was one of relief, which was an aha moment for me years later that, wow, this thing actually did work. So once the two older ones finished school, I was relieved and proud. From there on, for the other three children, I never had a single doubt that we could get to the end of our high schooling years and finish really well. Another aha moment was when my parents, several years into the homeschooling adventure for us, actually said how well the children seemed to be doing, that they were actually a little bit worried when we started out. Kudos for them for not interfering right at the beginning. For one of our children, I remember they were a bit concerned because of the natural shyness that was there and they might not have much social interaction. How wrong they were. So they were just watching as the years went by, and we knew we were being watched. And then the day came when they actually said, they're doing really well, Chris. Well done, you and Andrew. So other times when it just felt right and aha was on those days that everything was going so well and what we were doing, this whole homeschooling life. I always knew, I'd smile to myself and go, and if you like, aha, this is really good. Working through those difficult days, sometimes days that were so bad that I had to go back through my reasons of why, reassuring myself and coming out the other end, knowing that it was right, even though I was not feeling it on those days. Another question that relates closely to the aha moments and why I've included it with this is, at what point did you know you were doing the right thing by homeschooling your kids? This particular one, it's more nuanced toward the facts versus feelings of why we actually homeschooled. We knew we were doing the right thing by homeschooling our kids because right at the beginning, before we even took them out of school and came home, we had sorted out our reasons why. So we had facts in front of us. There was always a plumb line, if you like, that we could go back to. It's super important that you know your why, because at some stage you're going to have to look at your feelings, which might be tumultuous, and you could be crying face down on the bed going, why am I doing this? I'm ruining my children. So right back when we made our decisions, the research was showing us the chances of growing children who knew how to think were higher if we homeschooled, and in a non-school kind of homeschooling way. It's important to know the difference between knowing how to think and what to think. It's like saying to your child, express your thoughts until I disagree with you. So even if our children ended up coming to different decisions about really important things in life, such as faith and relationships, it was a risk we were prepared to take, provided they could demonstrate that they were thinking their way through something, yes, even through a child's mind or a young adult's mind, rather than stubbornly rejecting something because they just disagreed with it or didn't feel like it or really, really wanted or didn't really, really want something. We still might disagree with the end result of their knowing how to think and may be disappointed or even dismayed actually by the outcome. But we took that risk, and doing it all over again, I would still be prepared to risk that, because we don't need any young adults following ideologies based on their feelings or because their feelings have been manipulated cleverly without knowing how to question and thinking about the facts around those feelings. And I say that is a worthy risk. So another thing that we knew how we were doing right was we'd come across data which showed the outcome of children's education turned out to be best for homeschooling, then a private school, followed by public school. The research was showing us that we could do what we wanted to do to optimize the outcome of our children's education, which was one of the reasons that reassured us that choosing to homeschool was the right thing for us. That was 25 years or so ago. Another reason we knew we were doing right by homeschooling was that we had heard that siblings who homeschool together are more likely to end up having closer relationships, and I so wanted that for our children. I love my brothers and sisters, but I don't actually have a very close relationship with them, in that it's not an instinct for me to ring them up and go, hey, guess what, blah, 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 and tell them and share something really, really important to them. And I had seen sibling relationships like that. Now, typically, relationships between siblings tend to weaken as school friendships start to become more predominant. We wanted the siblings, which is more than a friendship, to be strong and stay strong and not weaken, as well as welcoming in the other friendships. You'll be familiar with that saying, blood is thicker than water. Both relationships are important, but family relationships, they're vital. Good, healthy family relationships are vital. Homeschooling suggested this outcome would be in our favour. And obviously we took that on faith because you can't see down the tracks. But looking back, we can see that for us this was so. It's a great sense of satisfaction to look at the way each of our children as adults seek out each other's company. And I should make it clear that some relationships are closer than others. All 5 of them don't sit down like as besties, but each one of them have specific strong relationships with another of their siblings. And you know what? If that was the only outcome of homeschooling, if it turned out that their education was just as much on the same par as no matter what school they had gone to, that in itself would have been enough for us to say homeschooling for us was the best decision we ever made for our family. So I'm going to end this question and answer time just by reflecting back. What I'm doing here is bringing to your attention and mine this life audit, this mini life audit while I watched her funeral. And thinking back over the years that have been, I can look with satisfaction to know there are few regrets of raising our children and living this lifestyle. It also challenges me now, and just moving into like the second or the latter part of our life. If I could look back in 20 years' time, am I going to give myself a little mini life audit and be satisfied that I used the time that God had given me to the best of my ability? I want to make these last years count in my families, my immediate family, my extended family, my friends, people that I end up mentoring and become friends with, even over podcasts like this. So the next time you have occasion to go to a funeral, can I challenge you just to sit there, let it just wash over your life, give yourself a mini audit. Don't beat yourself up about the things that you've done wrong. Just learn from it and then go out with what you know now is the most important thing in life. People, people, people. All right, well, I can feel myself getting a bit choked up, so I'll get going now and I will catch up with you on the next podcast. Bye-bye.